neither my ranking nor my vice here, so there's no one to entertain you but me. All right, we're going to start off the day. Are there any bill introductions? Yes, if you could come forward and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Good afternoon, Chairman Sutton, members of the committee. My name is Mihailo Ilic with Federico Durst Consulting Group, appearing today on behalf of the Kansas State Firefighters Association to request the introduction of RS 0800. It's a bill regarding COBRA plan coverage for firefighters.
COBRA plan coverage for firefighters. All right. Seeing no objections, that will be entered. Thank you. Any further bill introductions? A guy who looks familiar to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Turk here from the Kansas Insurance Department. We would request the introduction of RS 0722. This is simply a statutory cleanup bill. Over the years, there have been subsections moved and statute numbers that have changed. This is just reconciling those changes.
Simple and non-controversial. We love that. Seeing no objections, that also will be entered. Are there any more bill introductions? Seeing none. All right, let's get to work. Let's open the hearing for HB 2097, and to get us up to speed, come on, Eileen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2097 amends KSA 40-247 pertaining to penalties that an agent or broker would face for failing to pay premiums that are held in trust, failure to pay those over to insurers who make the insurance contracts for which the premiums were collected. So under current law, the failure of an agent or broker to pay premiums owed to an insurer after written demand has been made is considered prima facie evidence. And if you look at the footnote, it just says evidence that's sufficient to establish a fact or to raise a presumption of a fact unless rebutted. It's prima facie evidence that the agent or broker has used or applied the premium for a purpose other than paying those monies over to the company. And such failure would then subject the agent or broker to the penalties listed in subsection B of your bill. That's lines 21 through 28. House Bill 2097 would remove the requirement of written demand in establishing prima facie evidence, which would kind of eliminate one of the steps necessary in taking an agent or broker, assumably, to court for failure to pay. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
All right.
How about you, Cindy?
Oh, well, things just slowed down now.
Wow.
All right, are there any questions for the reviser? Seeing yes. Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this were to happen and an agent or broker didn't turn the money over through no fault of the insured, would the insured still be covered?
Him.
Yeah. All right, I'll save that
I would
for
assume
Eric.
yes, because in good faith, the insured person paid the premium. It's not the insured person's fault that the premium didn't get paid further.
All right. Well, Eric's shaking his head yes, so I.
We'll
Speak to that.
We'll get to that one in a minute. Any further questions for the reviser? Seeing none? All right, thank you. And as far as proponents are concerned, I have listed Eric Turek from the Kansas Insurance Department. Welcome back to committee, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I'll be sure to answer your question. You have my written, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Kansas Insurance, Eric Turek with the Kansas Insurance Department. The department does stand in support of this bill. This is what I'll call an anti-fraud measure. It's part of the department's legislative agenda. Again, you have my written testimony. I won't read from that. And Eileen did illustrate and highlight the prime contents of the bill. Specifically, this statute concerns agents who refuse to pay premium to a company. And so often an agent will collect premium from the policyholder and they'll pass that along to the insurance company. This statute specifically deals with when that premium is used for any other purpose other than paying, passing that along to the company. And it's completely against the law, and you can see there in the contents of the bill, depending on the amount of premium that's not passed on, it can range anywhere from a misdemeanor to a level 7 non-person felony. I really do want to talk about this written demand component, though. There are times when agents do hold on to their premium and they don't pass that along, and that is a crime. In this statute, in order for the state to prosecute these individuals, this written demand has to be made, and the written demand requirement itself is not explicit. It doesn't say that the company has to make this demand. The demand itself is, it does interfere with the prosecution of these bad actors. As I stated, the requirement for an agent to pay premium, it's very obvious that that's a crime. There are contractual obligations that also exist that say agent X has to pay company Y within a certain time frame and whatnot. Why the department wants to remove this is because there are rare cases where agents may hold on to premium and they may not pass that along to the company. A consumer may think that they have a policy where an agent may have told them they have a policy, but the policy doesn't exist, so the company doesn't even know that to expect this premium, so the company can't make a written demand if they don't know if they need, or if they're expecting a premium. So removing this would just completely allow, it would remove evidentiary issues when it comes to the prosecution of these cases. I will say that there are some, I think over the past 5 years, there have been 3 cases that we have passed along to the Attorney General's office. I can't speak to any specific cases, but I can say that this would aid in the prosecution of those bad actors. I also do want to state that if there is a bad actor out there where it's obvious that they have been withholding premium or using it for another purpose, the department does have the authority to take administrative actions, revoking license, and whatnot. So, but again, this specifically deals with agents who just refuse to pay premium to the company, and so this is beyond theft. This is using someone's money for another purpose, and then also when the premium isn't paid, the policy may lapse if the policy exists. So happy to answer any questions and clarify anything at the appropriate time.
All right, I think this is an appropriate time. What you described there was quite a racket where you could collect premiums and not take out a policy. My question, though, kind of goes to solvency on this particular bill. Okay, we don't have to send a letter to demand that you do what you contracted to do. How would you know even now, if the policy didn't exist, whether or not you had to write a letter? How do you know whether to file charges? How do you know a crime is even being committed?
Sure. In that specific example, I mean, there are times where an agent, the policy does exist, and for there actually is a policy, but the agent still just doesn't pass along that premium to the company. So that's how we would be alerted. The company would let us know, hey, our agent isn't relinquishing this money, revoke their license, do X, Y, and Z. I think in another case, hypothetical, where you have a policyholder, they get into a car accident, they believe that they are insured, and when it comes time for them to make a claim, they may find out that there was never a policy to begin with. So I hope, does that answer your question?
Sure. I was waiting for the next step right there. They're in an accident.
We would then be informed, so either the consumer or the company are going to inform us, and then we would investigate from there.
But what would be investigate it? That's the part I'm getting. If this didn't ever, if a policy was never taken out, what are you investigating?
The agent's wrongdoing. At that point, I mean, they are collecting what would be premium,
So you'd need the financial records.
financial, all sorts of records. I mean, and then it would go into a criminal investigation.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So about how prevalent is this? I mean, do you have any kind of numbers on how frequently something like this occurs?
Sure. A senator in the Senate FI&I committee did ask this question. Over the past 5 years, 3 cases that the insurance department investigated were passed on to the Attorney General's office. So this isn't most especially prevalent, but there are rare cases where bad acting agents are refusing to pay premium to their companies.
All right, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, I believe there was a question that was going to be started that, would that be, let's say that person was in a car accident. They find out they don't have a policy. Who's going to cover them? Or is it going to be at their loss?
That is a very good question. I'm sure there are statutes that outline that and regulations. I can be sure to get you that answer.
I would be interested in that because if they don't have coverage, then no one's held responsible, and that's a little late to find out. That would be my concern. Thank you.
Yes.
Just to follow up on your question, Mr. Chair, there have been a couple of cases where agents have signed a contract with an individual and then not passed the premiums along to the company. And in those cases, you've got 2 problems. One, if you have an accident, then the person has a loss and has to file suit. This provision, it seems to me, covers the wrongdoing of the provider. Is that?
This would be the wrongdoing of the, I do want to steer the conversation back to the agent who is using the premium for another purpose. That's the crux of this bill in the first place. It's chiefly to ensure that we can prosecute these agents who are essentially stealing premium and using it for another purpose. But Representative, Ranking Member Neighbor, I can be sure to get you that answer on that question.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none? All right, well, that wasn't so bad. Very good, thank you, Eric. All right, I have no other listed proponents. If anyone would like to speak in favor of HB 2097, speak now. All right, I will now close proponent testimony. Opponents I have listed as none. If there is anyone who is an opponent, now would be a good time to speak. Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral testimony if there's anyone who feels strongly neutral and would like to speak about it. All right, seeing none, I'll now close the hearing on HB 2097. We'll move on to HB 2098 because we like to be numerical. And to get us up to speed on HB 2098, we have Eileen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. House Bill 2098 amends KSA 40-2, 125, and that's pertaining to pertaining to penalties for entities that violate insurance law. It always sounds better when I'm writing the brief than when I'm speaking it. So KSA 40-1, 125 provides that after notice and opportunity for a hearing, that any person who is engaged or is engaging in any act or practice constituting a violation of any provision of Kansas insurance statutes are subject to any of the enumerated penalties described in paragraphs 1 through 3 of the bill, and that's going to be lines 12 through 23. So the definition of person in subsection D1 lists the business entities that are subject to statutory penalties for violations of insurance law. House Bill 2098 would add an additional generic catch-all language to the definition, making, quote, any other legal entities subject to the jurisdiction of the commissioner also subject to statutory penalties for a violation of insurance law. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Right. Questions from the committee for the reviser? You explained it so concisely, so clearly, that no one has a question.
Or they didn't hear.
Or they weren't listening. I don't know. Thank you, Eileen. All right, as a proponent, we once again have Eric Turek from the Kansas Insurance Department. I have tried to adjust the temperature, guys. I know it's hot in here. It's ridiculous. We're trying to cool it down, but I don't know how fast that's going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Turek here again with the Kansas Insurance Department. The department is a proponent on this bill, 2098. Essentially, this statute outlines penalties and violations for entities that violate Chapter 40. Chapter 40 is the insurance chapter statute. Monetary penalties, licensure suspensions and revocations, those are all outlined here. At the very end of the statute, or if you look at page 2, lines, starts at line 14, there's a list of entities that fall under the department's jurisdiction. It's a whole laundry list right there. This list includes almost every entity that falls under our jurisdiction except insurance agents. If you look at line 24, you'll see that insurance agents and brokers are not part of this list. Over time, the department has gained additional entities that have fallen under the jurisdiction thanks to the legislature. These include PBMs, for example. So if you look at that laundry list, PBMs are not in that list. So we simply seek to add the language and any other legal entity under the jurisdiction of the commissioner. This isn't expanding any. So, for example, PBMs are already under our jurisdiction in other portions of Chapter 40. The legislature passed the PBM Licensure Act last year, and PBMs is just one example. So, of a couple entities that do fall under our jurisdiction, but just aren't in this specific statute that allows us to specifically impose monetary penalties if they fail to file a report with the department where it's required, or if they violate any other part of Chapter 40. So other entities include continuing care providers, utilization review organizations, things like that. So this would just, honestly, this is a cleanup bill. This would prevent or not require the revisers and the department to come before you again should something additional fall under our jurisdiction. So happy to answer any questions at the time.
I have to commend you. This is a cleverly written bill. All right, committee, do we have any questions for Eric? Seeing none. Okay, very good. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak as a proponent of this bill, HB 2098? Seeing none, I'll close proponent testimony. I have no one listed as an opponent. If you feel like an opponent, raise your hand. Come speak. Seeing none, I have no one listed as strongly neutral either. If you are neutral and would like to speak, let me know. Seeing none, very good. We'll now close the hearing on HB 2098. Now, committee, you'll notice that we're running through quite a few bills here and not working any of them. We will do that. I just kind of have a personal angst with working a bill very soon after hearing it. I want to have a little time to digest it, and if you need any further research to then do that research prior to us working the bill. So if you think we're just flying through these things for no apparent reason and not doing anything with it, that's not exactly the way it's going to work, but it's a pretty good description for right now anyway. But as Let's move forward with HB 2090, open the hearing, and to get us up to speed, Eileen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. House Bill 2090 amends KSA 40-4905, 4906, and 40-5505 relating to certain fees charged by the insurance department. And the bill would essentially give the Commissioner of Insurance the ability to set the amount of these fees charged with an upper limit provided by statute. So under current law, KSA 40-4905 requires that a person applying for a resident insurance agent license pay a non-refundable fee of $30. HB 2090 would amend the provision to state that a person applying for a resident agent license would be required to pay a non-refundable fee in an amount not to exceed $30. And the bill would also require that the commissioner set the amount of that fee for the next year and publish it in the Kansas Register by December 1st of the current year. Similarly, under current law, KSA 40-4906 requires that a non-resident person who's applying for a non-resident agent license has to pay a fee of $50. Again, House Bill 2090 would amend the provision to state that the non-resident person would be required to pay a non-refundable fee in an amount not to exceed $50. And again, as with the previous statute, the commissioner is required to set that amount for the next year by December 1st of the current year, and then publish it in the Kansas Register. And then finally, under current law, KSA wow, that is missing the statute number. KSA 40-5505 requires an applicant for a public adjuster license to pay an application fee of $100. The bill would again amend that provision to state that an applicant for a public adjuster license would be required to pay a fee in an amount not to exceed $100. And again, as before, the commissioner would be required to set the amount of that fee for the next year by December 1st of the current year and then publish it in the Kansas Register. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
All right, so we're basically just adding up twos on this.
Right.
Okay,
We're eliminating a set amount.
Gotcha. Excellent. Questions from the committee? Seeing none? Your work is done. Very nice. All right, the proponent we have listed is, take a guess, Eric Turek from the Kansas Insurance Department.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Eric Turek here with the Kansas Insurance Department. I'm happy to be here in support of House Bill 2090. This is another key component of the department's legislative agenda and part of our mission to simplify processes and reduce fees. Eileen did describe the bill perfectly. There are statutorily set fees for licensure of resident agents, or if you're a Kansan, non-resident agents and agencies, and then also public adjusters. Those are just statutorily set at $30 for resident agents, $30, and then a biennial fee of $50 for non-resident agents and agencies. And then public adjusters, that fee is set to $100 regardless if you're a resident or not. We simply seek to add the language, the commissioner shall set a fee up to that figure. The figure, and so principally we just want to, if we can license agents and public adjusters for a cheaper price than what is in statute, we'd be happy to do that, as long as we cover our operations costs. The fee that the commissioner would determine would be published every year. So this isn't something that we would change willy-nilly or anything like that. So it's a really, really simple bill. We just really want the ability to lower fees whenever possible and make entry into the field a little bit easier. I will say there are 22,000 individual agents. Those are resident agents and 171 non-resident agents. So depending on how much lower we lower that fee, we could see a lot of savings for the industry and possibly consumers. So happy to stand for questions.
You said willy-nilly. All right. Right, arbitrary or capricious. I like willy-nilly better. But in a, in a previous capacity, I dealt quite a lot with the insurance department's budget. As I recall, the fee fund that is fed by licensure was growing at a pretty dramatic rate. I'm assuming that this is a way of trying to kind of get that fee fund balance out under control.
Absolutely, and again, if we can conduct our operations, I mean, if there are certain spots where we believe that we can reduce the fees and also continue operations as is, we're very happy to do that.
All right. Committee questions? Yes, Representative Bergquist. No,
Without direction or planning, haphazardly, politicians expanded spending willy-nilly. So just a brief definition of.
there you go. And an excellent example of its usage, yeah. All right, committee, further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you for being here, Eric. Do we have any further proponents? None are listed. I would imagine every insurance agent in the room is probably a proponent, I would hope. But they're not listed to speak. I'll close proponent testimony. Do we have any neutral testimony? Seeing none. Do we have any opponent testimony? And none there. All right, with that, we will close the hearing on HB 2090. I promised Representative Blue that I would do my best to get us out of here prior to 4 o'clock, and it looks like I am doing the gig. So instead, I'm going to give a soliloquy. Okay. No, next week, committee, we will be hearing a couple of more bills. We'll also start working on these bills that we've heard. So if you have questions about them, if there are amendments that you need to get to Eileen, that would be a very good thing to do because we will start working on those on Monday. So until that time, we are adjourned.